Okay, I think I'll start with this unless someone really wants to jump up on the bench, and you can at any moment anyway. But until we get a customer, I'll read and try to answer these questions that have come to our website, our beloved website. Yes. So, the first question, what happens during narcosis? Is the soul recharged there too? That's very interesting. I assume you mean what I call narcolepsy. And what's very interesting is that Sri Ramana, I won't say suffered from that because he didn't suffer. He wasn't diagnosed either, but he had a condition of narcolepsy. Okay. And in fact, this was the kind of like the main theme of his childhood, apparently, from his own later reminiscences, that he would fall asleep during the day or at night, and he could not be awakened by anything. He could be shaken, he could be screamed at. People could come in and literally carry him to other places. So kids would play tricks on him, and they'd carry him into the bed of a neighbor where, he'd wake up and, wonder where he was. And I think once they even put him in a little canoe on the lake, and he had to wake up without a paddle, and had to swim back or something. But anyway, they made fun of him. They really took advantage of the fact that, here was this, almost like in the Avatar movie, right? When the guy leaves that little coffin that he's in, the Avatar falls asleep, apparently, right? And so his avatar fell asleep and could not be awakened. Now, I think that was his training for becoming a sage, because you remember when he was in Tiruvannamalai, he came and sat in a now deep sleep waking state that had been integrated, and he would not move. He sat by the Shiva Lingam, and if it's not the will of God to move me, I ain't moving. There was no one there. And the kids in Tiruvannamalai would throw stones at him and try to do anything to get him to react, and he wouldn't. I think eventually people like Seshadri Swami and a few other compassionate souls brought him down to the basement. You remember the Patala Lingam, and nobody went down there. Or just rats and mice, ants, everything down there. Nobody went there because it was dark and very creepy. But there was a Shiva Lingam there, and he just sat there and meditated with no interest in life whatsoever. Karma pulled him out, and an attendant loyally took him up the mountain, right to the Palakotu, to this temple high on the hill where no one went hardly, because you had to climb, and just a few people occasionally would visit it. So he had total freedom then just to be. And for a long time he was just in that state until he moved again to Virupaksha cave, and then people started visiting him and asking him questions, and out of compassion he came out of his stillness and silence and began to talk. Interestingly, his birth name was Venkataraman, right? What does Venkataraman mean? It means the Lord of the hill, right? Venkata was a particular hill that was a sacred hill to Vishnu, or Rama, right? So the Lord of the hill was Rama, so it was Venkataraman. But he was brought up as a worshiper of Shiva, not of Vishnu. So he went to a Shiva temple, but he became the Lord of the hill. And he went to that hill of Arunachala because that was the place of the Lord. So he became one, right, with that. And when he was on the mountain, he realized himself as the Lord of the hill, and that his name at birth had been fulfilled. So destiny is involved, from the very beginning of the drama. It's written into the script, indeed. But who is the writer of the script? It's yourself. So, anyway, to get back to the question, which I deviated from, narcolepsy is a kind of a sleep state, but really it's a laya state. I don't think it's the same exactly as deep sleep. However, let's say it's as close a cousin to deep sleep as possible. Because, in deep sleep, there's always awareness. And the awareness, like when you're in deep sleep, if your awareness hears the alarm clock, it'll generally wake up. So why didn't he wake up when the alarm went off or his body got hit by a stone, and whatever? So there was a will that was operating in addition to the awareness to refuse to wake up, right? It was an act of rebellion, and it was an individuation that refused to be a part of the world. So that was already in his, let's say, character structure. How does one stay motivated working a job when one knows all is unreal? Does one have to give that up to be fully illuminated? Now, it's interesting that you state it as something you'd give up, meaning you like your job and you want to stay working there. But what does that really matter? The point is that it doesn't matter whether your character is motivated or not, whether it stays in the job or it leaves or not. It's completely irrelevant what happens to your character. Your character is what's unreal. So for an unreal character to care about what should I do in life now that I don't care about anything, right, is obviously a self-deception. Next question. You're probably sorry you asked these too, right? How does one prevent backsliding into egoic tendencies? Well, again, only an ego can backslide into egoic tendencies, right? So once you realize you're not the ego, there's no longer any motivation to have an egoic tendency. But and there's no such thing as backsliding or front sliding, because it's not about the ego not having egoic tendencies. There's no such thing as an ego that doesn't have egoic tendencies. It's only freedom from the ego that frees you from those tendencies. Okay? So if there's still any identification, yes, the tendencies will return. They'll show up. Do we really have to do anything to reach Satchit Ananda? Are we really the one deciding to let go of the ego, or is it already built into the story of the film? Okay, in a way, I already started to get to this question, but the real issue is who you mean by we. And interestingly, you phrase it, are we, which is plural, really the one, which is singular, deciding to let go of the ego. So no, the ego doesn't decide to let go of the ego. Impossible. And the self doesn't have to do anything to reach Satchidananda. You are Satchidananda, right? And yes, it's already built into the story, but only because you are the self who's building it into your story right now. Because you're the playwright. You write the story. And then you become the script that acts it out without understanding even why it was cast in that role. So the question can only be answered when you know that you are already that which you might want to reach. Next question. This is a longer one. Maybe I'll shorten it. My ego thinks it is stupid. That's accurate usually. And so it gets overwhelmed by all the information being transmitted. Yeah, I felt that would happen. Okay, and constantly questions everything. Well, that's good. It all ends, and that shows you're not really stupid, because stupidity is not questioning everything. It all ends in a feeling of hopelessness. That's good, because it is. And zero belief, okay? You want to have zero belief, but he goes on, zero belief that illumination will ever take place. Well, if you have zero belief, that's better than illumination. Okay? Because belief in illumination is not illumination. And it's only when you have zero belief that illumination happens. And even beyond illumination, liberation. Is there anything to do, or does illumination simply happen of its own accord if it is meant to? Accurate. This pressure to awaken before it is too late, while believing it's impossible to do, is causing such stress. Exactly. That's the stress that every ego is in, whether it's here at an ashram or out there in the world. It doesn't matter. That stress is inherent to every ego, because it knows it's a pretense, and that it's a phony. It's an imposter. Okay. Next question. I also, it's the same one, same person. I also have to ask how to transcend or get rid of, constant tinnitus. So that's interesting. It's driving me absolutely crazy, and I need the cause resolved ASAP. It's very interesting. It's interesting. I'll give two examples of why it's interesting. One is this fellow who's very famous now on the internet, Bernardo Kastrup. He has a video where he explains that in his own life, he stupidly caused himself to get tinnitus by turning on some siren very loud by his ear, and it blew it out. And then, in tinnitus, the ear makes crazy, horrible sounds that never stop, right? So he was suddenly in this very horrible situation where he wanted to die. Because if you have tinnitus, almost the first reaction of an ego is just that. The only way to get out of here is to shoot my brains out, because I can't stand it, There's never silence. It's constantly making noise. And that's what caused him to begin his spiritual journey, to overcome his belief that he was the body. And at a certain point, when the consciousness reached a level where the soul got awakened, it no longer heard the tinnitus, because it's only heard by the ego identified with the body. The sound no longer reaches when you're at a soul level. So that's a very good motivation. So tinnitus is one of the greatest blessings you can have, because it's going to force you either that or suicide, but that's not a good idea, because you'll probably get tinnitus in your next life, caused by blowing your brains out, and creating that sound again, and so there's no escape from hell through killing the body, but killing the ego, yes. So that's the way out. Anyway, recognize it as that, and that there is freedom from the symptom of tinnitus if, and I think only if, you fully transcend all belief in the ego's reality or interest in its psychological apparatus that is involved in being tormented by this sound. Okay, so in a sense, every symptom of suffering has that same principle behind it of motivating the soul to awaken and free itself. But that one is a specifically dramatic and an immediate, urgent situation to reach illumination. Why would a soul leave the heart and oneness of God to come to this earthly hell realm of duality, separation, and struggle just to be entertained? If its ultimate purpose is to evolve, becoming one with God, why leave another dimension where it's not a mere concept and come play this game? What's the gain? And am I playing the game or being played? Seems completely futile and unconscious to keep recycling back here in a losing game of insanity, of good versus evil, with what seems like one step forward and two steps back. Tango, anyone? Yes, tango is what you're involved in. Okay, that's a very good question and probably universal, right? Does everyone really have that question? Well, let me say this. For everyone, no matter when was your first lifetime, that lifetime, the first one in which you incarnated, however far back in time it was, that lifetime will be perfect joy. It will be the most wonderful, heavenly, extraordinary life that completely satisfies your jouissance and your values, and that life is one of total fulfillment, right? And that's when you say, "Oh, I like it here. I want to come back. I want more." And then in your next life, it's not quite so perfect. You made a little karma in that past life. Okay, you know. Well, come about 13 lives down the pike, and it's a hell realm that you want to get out of. But you made the commitment to want to be here. It was your choice. And then once you're here, of course, and you're identified with a character that has no essence or free will, you can't get off the wheel, all right? But the wheel first, brings you the dessert before the main course, and then, you get the bitters at the end to deal with your indigestion. That's the hell realm in the last few lives. So if you go back to the history of the world, really it was not until industrialization hit, the Industrial Revolution, they call it, where the world actually became a hell realm for nearly everyone. Because that's when they herded people off of the farms, were living an idyllic rural life, and created mega cities and created a proletariat, right? A lumpen proletariat of workers at the assembly line and that kind of thing. And life then became something very different. And with increasing technological capacity of mind control and surveillance and total dictation of where one lives and how, et cetera, and dumbing down of the educational system, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's a hell realm where the ego is totally enslaved. But it wasn't always that way. And so even now, there are some people who have lives that go back to the beginning of the Golden Age, and there are some people whose first life was in the Copper Age, or silver or copper, or beginning of the Iron Age. And there are some people whose first life actually is the one they're in right now. Right? So if you think about the people who rule the world right now, the billionaires, who also become movie stars and presidents, and prime ministers, they get everything. They're in heaven now. They are not in the hell realm, or at least they think that's the case, right? They're riding high. They're masters of the universe. But it doesn't last very long. And so they have to have all their 4 yugas in one life, right? So if you look what just happened in the U.S., one faction of the ruling class defeated the other one that had been in charge and took over. And now all the people who were riding high when the old cabal was running the deep state, they're now being unemployed and sued and prosecuted, and they're running from the law, and they're trying to escape, but Trump's long arm is going to, or Musk's maybe, is going to capture these poor muskrats and exterminate them. So, they're having their Iron Age too. And the same thing will happen to the current crop of billionaires who think they're now, on top of the world. So it's a very short period of enjoying a golden age. So you don't really want, I don't think anyone here would want to be Trump or Bill Gates or, you name the villain, Ronald Reagan, if anybody remembers him, right? All these, they're forgotten right away, right? Who even remembers, But these characters who seem to have everything, they really have nothing because they are just, paper-thin facades, websites that don't even have any pages on them, You got a landing page and that's it. This is it, yeah, okay. One-dimensional, So it's not, that you get what you pay for. And if you're willing to pay with everything, you get everything. But if you want to hold on and hoard it in your character, well, one birth and that's it, because you didn't give anything. So you can't come back to receive anything. And everything is settled. And you end up with nothing, but, you started with nothing. So nothing's lost, but nothing's gained. So if you want to get the prize, that's the cost. It's totally up to you. Okay, that's your free will, and that's my sermon for the night. That's the tango, right, that you're playing with yourself. Okay. As the ego is a creation of source intelligence, wouldn't it be more beneficial to learn how the mind works? Well, that's what we're teaching here. Understand what its strategies are, yes, and then use it like a judo or Jedi master, having it work for the soul. Absolutely. In fact, we have a retreat coming up later this year called, the Spirit of Aikido in the Spiritual Quest. That's exactly it. You want to master Aikido, which is a very powerful martial art, but very peaceful, and is the perfect martial art to be in non-duality and to use those principles through life. So she goes on, can we not just give the ego a new job description, grateful it has kept us safe thus far, and love it back into wholeness and oneness with the soul, God, and love itself? The soul is now the driver. Can we entrust the ego to take the wheel? No, you can't. But here's what happens. Ramana used this metaphor, and I think it's a very, very useful one. He said the ego of a liberated sage is like a rope that has been burned, right? A completely burned rope still looks like a rope. You can mistake it for a rope and think, oh, I can tie something up with this, or I can hang somebody with it, or I can do something with it, whatever you want to do with a rope. But if you try to pick it up, it's sand. It disappears. There's no actual rope there. That's the way the ego becomes. So when people in an ego state met Ramana in his ashram, all they saw was an ego. And they addressed Ramana as if he was this bodily person. They didn't realize that's not who they were talking to, because the ego can only see other egos. It can only project that there are other egos. It can't imagine that someone can be here and not be the ego. And your own ego can't imagine that you're here, but you're not your ego.